بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So we left off talking about the greater sin of breaking the promises, and we talked about the vow, the oath, and the swearing, which is ahd, nadar, and yamin, and the kafara for breaking those. And I believe that's where we left off. In the book, the next part, he says, breaking of a promise is a very serious sin. It is a sin that sows the seeds of hypocrisy in the heart of the person who commits it. The person dies in a state of disbelief and is raised with the hypocrites on the day of judgment. The Holy Quran says, and there are those of them who made a covenant with Allah. If he gives out of his grace, we will certainly give alms, and we will certainly be of the good. But when he gave them out of his grace, they became stingy, and they turned back, and they withdrew. So he made hypocrisy to follow as a consequence into their hearts till the day when they shall meet him, because they failed to perform towards Allah what they had promised him, and because they told lies. This is Surah Tawbah, ayat 75, 77. So we see the seriousness when we make an oath or a covenant that we need to fulfill this thing. And a promise, we have to fulfill it. The story behind this ayat is interesting. He says, according to Tafsir Minhaj al-Sadiqeen, is as follows. Thulb ibn Khatib was a very staunch and well-known Christian. One day he came to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He began to complain about him being poor, and he requested the Prophet to pray for him. So the Prophet advised him, don't emphasize on this prayer of yours, but be patient in your circumstances. Too much money is dangerous for you. If you are grateful for his favor, it is better than having a lot of wealth, which makes you unthankful. By Allah, if I pray that the mountains become gold and silver and move with me, Allah will cause it to be so. But I know that an honorable hereafter is better, and those who are well provided in this world have a difficult hereafter. So follow the Prophet of Allah and accept his advice. But this Christian man, he didn't follow the advice of the Prophet, and he came back to him with asking him more another time. He said, O Prophet of Allah, I make a covenant to Allah that if he gives me abundant wealth, I will spend it upon the deserving ones, and I'll do good with it. So he says, Rasulullah, if you pray for me, I get this money, I'm going to do some good stuff with it. And, I really need this, pray for me. So he kept asking the Prophet, and the Prophet prayed for him. So he asked for the removal of his poverty. So Allah gave an abundant increase in his livestock, and he ended up becoming a Muslim as well. His animals grew, they multiplied, and became so busy looking after those animals that he ended up stopped praying behind the Holy Prophet during Salatul Jama'ah. He got too busy, he couldn't come to congregational prayers anymore. So he only prayed the morning and the evening prayers. Then his herd became so big that the surrounding area of Medina wasn't big enough to hold this. So he took his animals to the outskirts of that town, and he settled over there. Now he was deprived of praying behind the Holy Prophet altogether because he is too far. Still, he continued to come to Medina for Salatul Jum'ah. Then his business expanded very big beyond the valleys surrounding Medina. Finally, he could not even attend Salatul Jum'ah anymore. One day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked his companions, why is he, not attending anymore? He's not coming to Jama'ah. The people said he has too many goats and sheep that a single valley is unable to accommodate all those animals. So now he has moved out to the outskirts, and he settled over there. The Prophet, when he heard this, he said, woe be upon Thulb. And he said it like 3 times. Later, when it was wajib to pay zakat, due to the revelation of that verse, Rasulullah got one of his followers, gave him the verse and wrote it down, had it written down, and he sent them out to that person. So the Prophet ordered, after you collected zakat from this tribe, go to this person, that man that came and prayed before Thulbah. So go to such and such good man and collect the zakat from him too. So both of them, they went to this person. It was this person who went was it says one of the tribesmen of Bani Salim. So they went to this person and they showed him the Quranic verse and also gave him the letter of the Prophet containing the rules of zakat. But he had become so much attached to his wealth that he said, Muhammad is collecting jizya from us. Go away and go somewhere else, and I'll think about it. So he basically, jizya is the money that they collect from those dhimmis, the people that are living under the Islamic government, but they are non-Muslim. So like Christians and Jews, and they enjoy all the benefits of the Islamic government, but they do not have to partake in the wars and other things, but they just pay a tax and they live there. So he said, Prophet is taking this from me, maybe because he used to be Christian. He's trying to impose tax on me, now the Bala, but this is what he was thinking. He didn't want to give away his money. He said, I'll think about it, The two men went to this righteous person of the tribe of Bani Salim. When he saw the ayat and the letter from the Prophet, he said, I hear and I obey the command of Allah and the Prophet. From this person from the other tribe. So he went among his camels and he picked the best ones for zakat. And he said, please take these for the messenger of Allah. The people collecting zakat, they told him, it's not wajib to give your best camels. He said, how can I not offer my best for Allah and his Prophet? Then the two men, they came back to the Thulbah, this man the Prophet told him to go to. This person, he said the same thing as last time, and he refused to pay the zakat. When the Prophet heard about the incident, he said just once, woe be upon Thulbah. When the Prophet prayed for the well-being of the one who had paid the zakat willingly. So the Prophet prayed for one guy who gave the best of his animals and he paid the zakat, and he said, woe on the other one. The companions used to wonder why Thulbah had not accepted the advice of the Prophet and saved himself from apostasy, meaning that zakat is dururiyatul Islamiyya. So it is the essential of religion. And someone who says essential of religion is not wajib, they have exited outside of Islam. We've talked about this before. Like if someone says salat is not wajib or fasting is not wajib, it's different if they believe it's wajib and they just don't do it. This will make them sinner and sinful. But if they say that it is not wajib at all, then this is a problem. It will put them outside of the Islam. So if they say zakat is not wajib, for example, he said the ayats quoted before the discussion, before this discussion, were revealed for this person. So he prayed and he asked Allah for the Prophet to pray to Allah for him to get money, to become rich, and he would do good things with it. But when he got money, what did he do? He got so busy, he got distracted, he quit praying with the Prophet, he quit going to Jummah, he moved far away, and then eventually he rejected the Prophet's commands and Allah's commands about the zakat. So a lot of time we think that money is something good for us, but then sometimes it can be a test that maybe Allah knows we might not pass that test. So, money is good if we have it, we do the right thing with it, but not everybody can handle that responsibility of having the money and doing the right things with it. He said the third type of promise is when people form actual covenants and agreements. The ayats and the traditions state that it is wajib to fulfill this type of promise and it is haram to go against them. For example, Surah 17, ayat 34, and fulfill the promise. Surely every promise will be questioned about. Also, the Quran describes truthful and pious people and those who fulfill their promise when they make a promise. It's Surah Baqarah, ayat 177. We have some narration about this that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, Allah never appointed anyone to prophethood unless he was honest and he was trustworthy. And we must return what we are entrusted with to his owner, whether he is a good doer or an evil doer. It doesn't matter in this regard. When we make a promise or a covenant, we have to fulfill that promise. The example of being trustworthy is in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was called Al-Amin, the trustworthy, even by his enemies. And we have to strive to follow his example to the best of our ability and, follow his ethical teachings. But one time, a man named Ammar, who was a shepherd in Mecca, he said, I took my sheep every day to the forest of Mecca to graze. Muhammad also brought his sheep. One day I said to him, there is a green valley between these two hills. It's very nice for grazing the sheep. If you agree, then both of us can take our sheep there tomorrow and let them graze. In the morning, he says, I took my sheep to the appointed place and I saw that Muhammad had already brought his sheep there, but he didn't let them graze. On asking about this, the reason for this, he said that I had made a promise that you and I will graze our sheep together in this place. So I didn't let my sheep graze until you got here. I mean, this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a good example of keeping his word, even down to the minute details. And we have to ask ourselves, how many of us honor the meetings that we make with others like this? Or do we not care much about them, or we show, we don't pay attention to the details, or maybe we don't show up at all. We give that casual inshallah, like the one that means, yeah, okay, but maybe, but don't count on it, that one. So we have to be careful when we say that we want to do something, or we promise to do something, that we hold our end of the bargain and that we uphold our promise. And if we're not going to do it, and we know we're not going to do it, we shouldn't make promises or shouldn't commit or shouldn't say inshallah, because we know we're not even going to put any effort into doing that. So we should just be honest and say that we won't be able to make it, or this. Not tell someone, yeah, I'm coming, I'll meet you in the park, and then the person is in the park and the other person never shows up and don't answer their phone or something like that. Whatever we do, we have to honor our word. We have to remember that Prophet was Al-Amin and that we are followers of the Prophet, so we should also follow him in this, trying to be trustworthy. He said the next surah, he mentioned Surah Mu'minun, ayah 8, and those who are keepers of their trusts and their covenant. We see that Imam Ali alayhi salam said, Ya Kumail, you should realize and know that we do not permit anybody to breach the trust of anybody. Whoever relates that I have permitted anybody to breach the trust is surely wrong and sinful, and his result will be the hellfire. I swear I heard the Prophet ﷺ say to me frequently, just 1 hour before his death, he would say, Ya Abul Hassan, give back what you are entrusted with to its owner, whether he is pious or sinful, in big and small things, even if it is a thread or a needle. And he said this thing 3 times. So it's not something to be taken lightly. The Prophet emphasized upon it on his deathbed. We have to honor the trust, even if it's something small, because it's the principle of the trust that counts, not whether the item is big or small. And this right is for all mankind, and we have to honor people's trust regardless who they are and if they are pious or not pious. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he said, if a person has considered you to be trustworthy and has entrusted something to you, then you should return his trust in a perfect condition. And if a person has committed breach of trust with you and betrayed you, then you should not betray him. If people have trusted us with something, then we must honor that trust. They're taking a chance on us, hoping that we will honor and uphold the thing they have entrusted to us, and we shouldn't let them down, even if they have betrayed our trust. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, do not commit a breach of trust with a person who has committed a breach of trust with you, because in that case, you will too be like him. So we don't want to be like that person who has breached the trust with us. We should be better than that. A lot of time people say, that person took advantage of me and cheated me, so I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to do the same to them, even do worse to them than they did to me. So sometimes the person can go from being oppressed to becoming the oppressor. So, for example, this person took something from them or damaged their property or something like this. They damaged one thing of theirs. So he says, I'm going to go get revenge for this. So instead of doing like he said, I will damage one thing of theirs, the equal value, he burns their whole factory down or their whole store down. And he went from being the oppressed to becoming the oppressor. Or someone backbited against him and told one person something. He got upset and went and backbited against the other person to 10 people, 100 people, more or even more than that. So he went from becoming the oppressed to end up becoming the oppressor. So we are better people than that, and we have to, stick to our word because we are followers of the best example of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says to keep your word to your believing brother is wajib, like a vow, even though there is no expiation of going against it. So the Prophet said, one who has belief in Allah in the last day must keep his word when he promises. Thus, keeping a promise is a fulfillment for the belief in Allah in the last day. Similarly, the beginning of verses of Surah As-Saf have also denounced the breaking of promise and clearly proved that non-fulfillment of a promise of every type is haram. He says, fulfilling of a promise is dealing with the belief of Allah and the day of resurrection. The one who knowingly breaks his promise all the time, and he lies and he promises and he knows he will not fulfill these promises, he is not thinking about day of judgment, that he will have to answer for all of these things. When he makes a promise with someone and then he breaks that promise, he shatters the trust that he has been given. These are offenses. This haqqan nas, this actually, violating the rights of people. And when we do this, we have to answer for these things. Sometimes these things could be small things that someone may overlook and forgive you, or maybe they could be bigger things that we were entrusted with, and we broke those trusts and broke those covenants and broke those vows and promises that we made with other people. And the person who does this all the time and frequently with no remorse, they are not thinking about day of judgment, that they will have to answer to Allah and angels are writing their deeds. So we need to be more conscious of this and know that we have, even when no one is around, that we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watching over us and taking account of our deeds. He says the Prophet is reported to have said, 3 traits or characteristics make a person a hypocrite, even if he prays and he fasts: betrayal of the trust, lying, and non-fulfillment of a promise. So a person could be praying salat, he could be fasting month of Ramadan, he could be paying his zakat, he could be going to Hajj, he could be giving his khums, could be doing all of his wajibat, but at the same time, he is breaking his promise, he is lying, he is betraying the trust. In these situations, he has characteristics of munafiq, of hypocrite. So these things are very important to pay attention to. So when we say something, we should pay attention to what we say, not make empty promises. And when we say something, we should honor that thing and be men of our word, as we could say. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, those who are just in their dealing, those who do not lie, and those who fulfill their promises are from those who have perfect morals. And it is haram to criticize them behind their back. Their being just or adil is obvious. To maintain brother relationship with them is wajib. When we find people like that, we should befriend them, and they are as our brothers. He says, it follows from this tradition that a person who is unjust, a liar, and who does not keep his word and does not possess morals. He is not a just person, but he is a transgressor, and it is not wajib to fulfill the rights of brotherhood towards him. So what he gets from this is call it mafhum, is takes the opposite of this. So if we have a principle for one thing, then the opposite can be said for the other thing. So he's saying in this narration that it's to maintain brother relationships is wajib if the person and we cannot criticize them if they are just in their dealings, they don't lie, they fulfill their promises, and they have good morals. So the opposite is true for the person who breaks his promises, breaks his is not just in their dealings, and they lie and all of these things. Then it is not wajib to fulfill the rights of brotherhood for them. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam also said there are three obligations in fulfillment of which Allah does not give concession to any: to behave well with the parents, whether they are righteous or they are sinners; to fulfill one's promise, whether to a righteous person or a sinner; and to deliver a trust to its owner, whether he is righteous or he is a sinner. Imam Bakr alayhi salam has similar narration. Allah has not given superiority to a mu'min, a believer, in three situations. First, to return what has been trusted to you for safekeeping, whether it belongs to a mu'min or a kafir, believer or disbeliever. Secondly, fulfilling an oath, whether it is given to a mu'min or a kafir. Third, doing good to the parents, whether they are mu'min or they are kafir. So regardless of a person's faith, we must keep and fulfill our word. We cannot take advantage of a person just because they say they are just because they are a disbeliever. We have to remember that our actions with other people from different faiths will either attract people towards Islam or it can push people away from Islam, actually. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from setting bad example for mankind and allow us to follow the best examples. For the best example for mankind is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Our fourth Imam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, says, by he who has sent Muhammad as a prophet of truth, even if the killer of my father, Hussein ibn Ali, entrusts me with a sword with which he killed my father, I will surely return it back to him. This shows the magnitude of, fulfilling the trust. Even if the killer of his father gave him the sword that he killed his father with, killed an imam with, and told him to watch over this sword, he would give it back to him in its, the same condition. Imam Bakr alayhi salam said, abide by piety, diligence, honesty, and fulfillment of the trust of the charitable as well as the sinful. If the killer of Ali ibn Abi Talib gave me a sword, gave me a trust, deposits with me a trust, I will surely keep it for him. So even if the killer of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Ali alayhi salam, gave him something, that he would give it back to him. He would keep it for him. He would hold it as a trust until he came back, and then he would give it to him. We see the Prophet did this for even the pagans in Mecca. He held their things. That's why he was known as Al-Amin. He would give the trust back to him. And when he migrated to Medina, he asked Imam Ali alayhi salam to return those things to their owner. Imam continues, he said, return whatever you are entrusted with to its owner, even if the owner is the murderer of Imam Hussein. No one should be regarded as trustworthy before he keeps three things: money, secrets, and honor. He who keeps two of these and he betrays the third is not trustworthy. So you need to have three characteristics of being trustworthy. So it has to be with their funds, their money, secrets, and honor. We have to be trustworthy when we're dealing with people's valuables, their belongings. If they give you a loan, you should fulfill all the conditions of that loan. If they entrust you with something, ask you to watch over it, to keep it safe, then make it your priority to guard that thing, and don't let something happened to it or be careless with it. We have to protect it even more than our own things. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says, one must also fulfill that promise that he has made to his wife. For a person is always careful of his promise, except when it is making a prohibited thing legal or prohibiting a thing that which is permitted. So we need to, when we get someone's hopes up and we tell them something, we need to fulfill that promise. A lot of times we make empty promises to our spouses, but then we break those promises. So we see, as Imam says, one must also, he was like, okay, all of these are good, that we fulfill trust between each other, with the brothers, with community, with other things. But then it comes down to, he says, oh, also you need to fulfill that promise that you make to your wife. So we need to keep in mind this and not make empty promises. And when we do make a promise, we should think about it. If we're going to make the promise, or if we're going to give our word, we say we're going to do something, we should think about it and make sure that we really want to do this. And then when we say we're going to do it, we need to do it. It's not like that thing where I don't know, you see, they said, if a man says he's going to fix something, he's going to fix it. Don't worry about it. You don't need to remind him every year about it. So, we need to, if we say we're going to do it, we should do it, inshallah. He says it's an established fact that there are numerous Quranic verses and traditions which prohibit the breaking of a promise and makes obligatory the fulfillment of promise. The following verses are sufficient to prove this point. Surah 8, Anfal, ayat 55 through 56. Surely the vilest of animals in Allah's sight are those who disbelieve. Then they would not believe. Those with whom you make an agreement, then they break their agreement every time, and they do not guard against punishment. So we see that this is one of the bad traits that Allah has mentioned about those who disbelieve and are very low. They have allowed their lower desires to overpower their intellect, that when you make an agreement with them, they always break their agreement. So he says, thus those who do not fulfill their promises are the worst creatures. They are worse than animals. In this verse that we see, Allah says. It is also important to know that Allah has ordered us to honor and fulfill even the treaties and the promises made with the disbelievers and the polytheists. The promises cannot be disregarded. In any case, we need to uphold these promises. He says, when the power and glory of Islam was at its zenith, a verse from Surah Bara'ah was revealed ordering jihad against the polytheists. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to purify Mecca from the filth of polytheism and idol worship. But it was also ordered not to break the treaty with the polytheists if they did not break it. It's the ayat Surah Bara'ah or Surah Tawbah, ayat 4. Except those of the idolaters with whom you made an agreement. They have not failed you in anything and have not backed up anyone against you. So fulfill their agreement to the end of their term. Surely Allah loves those who are careful of their duty. So even with the polytheists and atheists, we can say, and anyone, we make an agreement, we need to honor that. Because people will judge us based on this also. Imagine, I have seen it before. It's very unfortunate, but I went to one place, one community. The brother was telling me, I do a lot of business, but I said, oh, you have like business with other brothers in the community? He said, unfortunately, I cannot deal business with them because they are not trustworthy and they always break their promise and they don't fulfill their, the things they need to do. So I go and I do business with non-Muslims and they treat me very well and they honor their word and they uphold their contracts and everything. Ajib, like it's so strange, so weird. We are supposed to deal with each other and we are supposed to be, following the best example and upholding the teachings of Islam. But when it comes down to the business, sometimes the Muslims find it more beneficial to go deal with non-Muslims. And it just shows how far in that place, like how far people were off of the track. We should be dealing with each other and doing business with each other because we um, should also be adhering to all these teachings, whereas the other groups don't even know about these teachings. But unfortunately, some people have thrown the teachings on the side and they are not fulfilling their promises. Says Abu Rafi says, the Quraysh sent me to the Holy Prophet. When I met him, my heart became illuminated with his countenance. I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, I do not wish to go back to the Quraysh. He said, I would not act against the terms of the treaty and retain their messenger. Abu Rafi, go back to your people now, and after this, if you wish, you may accept Islam and join us. So the condition was they were not supposed to keep those people who came, and they needed to send them back to Mecca. So he wanted to stay, but the Prophet said, I cannot do this because it would violate the treaty. So there's other stories and incidents about these type of things. But the Prophet had to honor the treaty, no matter whatever the conditions were, he had to honor it. It says Hudhayfa Yamani says that there was one thing that discouraged me from participating in the Battle of Badr. Abu Husayl and I were going out when we came face to face with some men from the Quraysh. They said, do you love Muhammad? We said, we love Medina. They made us promise that after reaching Medina, we should not accompany the Prophet in the battle. When we met the Prophet, we told him of this promise that we made. And he said, do not think of joining the battle due to this oath of yours. We shall seek divine assistance. So we see that the importance of upholding the covenant and the promise, that even the Prophet wanted, it would have been beneficial for them to join the battle and help the Prophet. The Prophet said, since you've made this promise, do not break it and don't join the battle. Allah will help us and Allah will aid us. He didn't want them to go against their word and break their promise. This other example I was thinking of, he mentions it here. He says, during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, Suhail ibn Omar was representing the disbelievers and negotiating with the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it was time for a drawing of the treaty and the signatures were yet to be affixed, Jundal, the son of Suhail, left the disbelievers and went to the Muslims. Seeing that he was attracted to the Muslims, the Quraysh chained his legs, but he escaped with the chains intact. He went away with the Muslims and began to behave like one of them. When his father saw this, he came to his son and gave him a slap, like it said, very loud, like hit him very hard. Then he told the Prophet, Ya Muhammad, this treaty is the first step of reconciliation between you and us, and as per its terms, you have to surrender my son to me. The Prophet agreed and surrendered Jundal to his father, who was Kafir, but upon the condition that he would be protected and he would not be harmed. Suhail ibn Omar agreed to this condition. When it was time to hand over Jundal to the disbelievers, he protested. He said, O Muslims, I have become Muslim. How will you return me to the polytheists? But the Prophet told him, go, but have patience. Allah will provide ease to you in this way only. We cannot go against the terms of the treaty. So Suhail caught his son's hand and he took him away. Unfortunately, he did not remain true to his promise, and he ended up torturing his son a lot after this. But this incident shows the importance of fulfilling a promise and upholding it and not violating the treaty. So even though his son suffered in this case because his father did not uphold the promise or the covenant, he would be rewarded for that suffering that he went through and get great rewards with Allah, inshallah. He says, there's a narration in Bahar al-Anwar. It says, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he promised a man that he would wait for him at an appointed place near a stone. The Prophet waited there, but the man did not show up. Morning turned into afternoon while the Holy Prophet stood in the blazing sun. Some of his Sahaba, they came and they said, please stand in another place. But he said, I cannot move away from here until that man returns. The man finally came back, and the Prophet said, if that man had not come, I would have stand in this spot until I died. I would have stood here until my death. So it shows the importance of honoring this thing. Most of the time, we are not very cautious with our covenants and our oaths, and we don't pay much attention to them as we should, we see from these narrations. He says, Holy Quran refers to Prophet Ismail as the truthful in promise. We see in the verse, Surah Maryam, ayat 54, and mention Ismail in the book. Surely he was truthful in his promise, and he was an apostle and a prophet. Ismail alayhi salam had promised to wait for a person who did not turn up. 3 nights passed, but he still kept waiting. However, according to most of the scholars and well-known tradition, the period of his wait was a whole year. Wow, waiting that long. During this time, he also had to bear untold difficulties and sometimes survived on leaves. So this shows the great lengths that our prophets went through in upholding their promises. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam mentioned that it is disbelief that causes one to go back on his word and break a vow. He says, by Allah, Muawiyah is not more cunning than I am, but he deceives and commits evil deeds. Had I not been hateful of deceit, I would have been the most cunning of all men. But the fact is that every deceit is a sin, and every sin is a disobedience to Allah, and every deceitful person will have a banner by which he will be recognized on the day of judgment. So he said, due to this is disobedience to Allah, it is something that he would stay away from, that he would never approach, because he is ma'soom, he is infallible, and he only does what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to his choice. Allama Majlisi says that the one who commits greater sins is also referred to as a disbeliever in traditions. Hence, every type of deceitful person has been called a kafir in this sermon. It is that disbelief which has its root in the heart and which takes the form of disobedience to Allah's commands. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, surely fulfillment of pledge is the twin of truth. I do not know a better shield against the assaults of sin than it. One who realizes the reality of a return to the next world never betrays. Knowing that we have to stand and face Allah for our actions is one of the key factors in restraining oneself from evil deeds, as we see from this line in this sermon. One who realizes the reality of return to the next world never betrays, because we know we are held accountable for everything we do in this life. So when we know this and we understand inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, we will handle things better in this world, and we'll be mindful that we have to return to Allah and we'll have to answer for everything we do. So we will think more about the things that we do. Imam says, we are in a period when most of the people regard betrayal as wisdom. In these days, the ignorant call it excellence of cunning. What is the matter with them? May Allah destroy them. One who has been through thick and thin of life finds the excuses preventing him from orders and prohibitions of Allah, but he ignores them despite his capability to succumb to them and follows the command of Allah. While one who has no restraints of religion seizes the opportunity and accepts the excuses of not following the commands of Allah. Some of the mujtahideen, they consider violation of a promise to be a kind of falsehood, especially when at the time of promising, one has no intention of doing it at all. Then all the verses and traditions that we read that denounce falsehood also apply to this. He said, what about if there are some conditions? According to the fatwa of the leading mujtahids, it's wajib to honor the term and conditions of a transaction, and it is obligatory to fulfill them. For example, the buyer can put a condition that if the goods are defective, he can return them in 2 months. Or the seller may put a condition that the buyer must not spoil the goods if he wishes to return them. In such situations, it is wajib to honor the terms of the agreement. Similarly, if the landlord has restricted the use of his premises to anyone except the tenant has to observe the terms faithfully. Both the parties to a transaction have a right to lay down some terms and conditions. Other mujtahids state that not only is it wajib to honor the terms and conditions of a transaction, but the one who has put them may enforce his rights and insist on the condition being fulfilled. For example, if an employee has laid a condition that he shall be paid his salary on the first day of every month, then not only is it necessary to pay him as agreed, but the employee has a right to demand it on that day. And he can even take it from the employer if he has a contract that he has to pay, the employer has to pay him on that day, he can complain about that and he can actually take it on that day. At times, it may happen that the conditions agreed upon are quite irrelevant to the actual transaction and not directly related to it. Even in these cases, it's necessary to fulfill the obligations. In all respects, fulfillment of a promise is so much emphasized in the Quranic verses and the traditions that one should be extremely careful in honoring every type of agreement and pledge. If a person has to give a promise under compulsion and he does not wish to become a sinner, he is forced to give this promise. He can use words like maybe or if or inshallah. For example, he can say, inshallah, I will do this. If Allah wills, I will do this. So instead of making it definitive, he puts a condition to the promise. We have this last paragraph, and then we'll end. It will start a new chapter for the next week. He says, it's of the opinion of Allama Hilli and other mujtahids agree that every vow or pledge after uttering inshallah or its translation in any other language make the pledge conditional to the divine will. Hence, it's not strictly wajib to fulfill it, but if it is with regard to some promise or condition of an agreement that concerns a wajib act, or it is for the avoidance of a haram act, then it has to be observed faithfully, even after uttering inshallah. So inshallah puts the condition on the promise. So if you make the promise without saying inshallah, is binding on this, but inshallah, leave some room. You'll say like, I will meet you in the park, inshallah. But your car broke down or it rained really heavy and you couldn't reach the area. There's something that happened. You wanted to go, but inshallah, something came but you made it conditional on inshallah. And then something came and blocked it and you were not able to go. Should also let the person know, but maybe, sometimes back in the older days, they didn't have communication. And there was no way to let them know they could not make it. He says, it must, however, be understood that the promise which is made conditional by saying inshallah is not binding, only when the person intends the actual meaning of the term inshallah. That is, he must really mean to subject the matter to Allah's will. If he utters inshallah only for the sake of seeking divine blessings, then it is binding on him to remain firm on his vows. So it depends, it's dealing with the intention. It should also be clear that it is not only permitted to disregard a promise of abstaining from a wajib act or to perform a haram act, but it is in fact haram to fulfill it. For example, one vows to punish his wife or son if they did such and such a thing. It is better to disregard such vow and forgive them instead. Or someone says, if you prove me wrong, I will leave Islam. Or if you prove me wrong, I will drink alcohol, or some haram act or something like this. These vows are invalid and they should be disregarded. Quran says, and let not those of you who possess grace and abundance swear against giving to the near of kin and the poor and those who have fled in Allah's way, and they should pardon and turn away. Do you not love that Allah should forgive you? This is Surah Nur, ayah 22. It means that Allah forgives the sins of those who forgive the wrongdoings of others. Then the last part is Prophet Ayub and his oath of hitting his wife with 100 times. It says, we talked about this in God's emissaries before, but we'll just bring what the author says here. And in a situation where one has taken an oath in utmost seriousness to inflict punishment, and one does not wish to go against his oath, it is better to carry out the oath in a manner that is a token punishment is given, and the oath is not violated. So the oath is fulfilled, but the other thing is like symbolic. It's not really something. So both are fulfilled. Instead of casting one aside, and then you would be breaking the oath. So he says, for example, Nabi Ayub alayhi salam saw his wife doing something against his will. He took a vow to hit her 100 strokes after he recovered from the illness. When he recovered from the illness, Allah ordered him, and take in your hand a green branch with 100 twigs, and like tap her with it once at one time. That way you do not break your oath. This is Surah 38, ayat 44. We say by hitting is not, it was something you're tapping like lightly to admonish them that, but it's not something that, because if you hit someone hard or you hurt them and you cause a bruise or anything like this, it requires kafara and other things, which is definitely not allowed in Islam. And we discussed this when we talked about the chapter of Nabi Ayub alayhi salam in God's emissaries. So if you want to go back over that, we have it recorded and uploaded. So we'll end here and we'll take a 5-minute break and come back, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.